Hello everybody and welcome to the Money Man. Now today I have a series of banknotes from the 1980s from the formerly unified country of Sudan. And they're very interesting because Sudan has gone through many different changes in terms of its banknotes from the 1980s onwards. And this really reflects the division between the south of Sudan and the rest of Sudan, and I'll give you a sense of that as I talk about these banknotes. But what I'm going to actually show you is a near complete set of the first Sudanese pound, and I'll explain why I say the first Sudanese pound in a moment. Okay, so let's have a look at the lowest denomination, which is the 25 piastres banknote, and I'll tell you a little bit of history as we go along. So here is the lowest denomination that I have. And you can see it's the subunit. That's why it says it's a piastres banknote, and I'm probably mispronouncing that, as I always do. I can never quite get my tongue around that word. But straight off the bat you can see it's interesting because we've got the old geographical representation of Sudan. Now this is before it partitioned into two countries. Now we have the Sudan in the north, and then from the middle here down to the bottom we have South Sudan, two independent nations, because there was a civil war and the country split in two. Now the reason for this is because the centre and north of the country is predominantly Muslim, and the south is predominantly Christian, so the country is pretty much fractured along religious lines. And there's supposed to be like a different culture between the two different regions as well, which is quite interesting. And you'll see some of that conflict play out in the history of the currencies that they used, which I will elaborate on throughout the course of this video. So the front is quite interesting. However, the reverse of these banknotes is pretty boring because it's all the same. Now, I don't know what this building is. I haven't gone into any great detail in terms of the images on these banknotes because I'm focusing more on the monetary history, which is more interesting for me and hopefully for you guys too. So that is the lowest denomination I have. Now there's no discernible watermark in this banknote because it's a very low a low value banknote of the time. So let's have a look at the next one. The next one is the 1 Sudanese pound note. Here it is. Now again you can see that we've got that geographical representation of the former Sudan in the centre of the banknote, and what we'll do is we'll have a look at the watermark, and there we go. We've got the sigil of the old Sudanese state right there poking through, so pretty cool, quite nice design. We've got a lovely flower which looks very similar to a poppy flower, an opium flower. I don't know what it is, but yeah, just nestled on the left there. If anybody knows, if we've got some gardeners or florists out there who know, let me know what species of plant that is. I'd love to know. So yeah, quite interesting. But if we spin it around and look at the back, you can see it's boring. It's dull because it's just the same building. Yeah, so we'll skip on ahead. Now, the interesting thing about this, I said it's the first Sudanese pound because the Sudanese pound was actually replaced with the Sudanese dinar. And basically what they did is they decided to change the currency and introduce the Sudanese dinar, and that proved to be extremely unpopular, especially in the south. And there was a lot of conflict still between the south and the rest of Sudan, and basically they then decided to abandon the dinar and reintroduce the Sudanese pound, so you actually later on have the second Sudanese pound. So it's quite interesting, and obviously in South Sudan they use the South Sudanese pound, so it gets quite confusing. But here is the next one, which is the 5 Sudanese pound note, and again quite nice. We've got cattle represented, and the sort of like a agrarian history of the region, of the people of the region, represented right there. Lots of cattle herders that live out in the wilds of Sudan. And if we have a look, you can see that watermark popping through again. There it is. So very nice. The colour scheme of these banknotes is okay. It's a little bit bland, but they are interesting banknotes nonetheless. Remember, they're from the 1980s, so we can't expect too much. Spin it around and look at the back. You can see it's the same thing again, but with 5 Sudanese pounds. So we'll skip over this quite quickly. Okay, the next one I have is the 10 Sudanese pound note. And this one I quite like. I quite like the design of this. You can see we've got a wonderful fort which is interesting because the construction style is very medieval. So I wonder if this is a hangover from colonialism. It was sort of, obviously not a medieval building, probably more modern, built in the medieval style. But again, I'm just guessing here. And we've got this wonderful, it looks like a text written in what I assume to be a local dialect, and then in Arabic here, I think. Yeah. Any ideas? I have no idea. I could be completely wrong. I always struggle with notes with Arabic on because it's completely undiscernible for me. But anyway, so let's have a look at the watermark. You can see it's the same thing. We've got the eagle there of Sudan. And if we have a look at the reverse, you will see it's the same thing again. Now, the colour scheme makes the reverse of this one a little bit more interesting, but I guess this must have been like the Sudanese Parliament building or something like that. Again, I don't actually know, but interesting style. There's sort of a nod to agriculture and the tribal history with these different images in the banknote that go through and around. But yeah, pretty much bland, really. So the next one I have is the 20. And here it is, the 20 Sudanese pound note. Now this one isn't too bad either. I like this, the riverboat on the left is quite nice. And you can see that, again, we've got that same watermark poking through. So that's not too bad. So yeah, interesting colour scheme, but not too much different going on in terms of the basic layout of the banknote. Spin it around and look at the back. Now there are many other banknotes that these remind me of. They remind me of Iraqi banknotes. They remind me of the old Yemenis banknotes. They remind me of the old Syrian banknotes. So yeah, the style is very, very similar actually. A lot of countries, sort of Middle Eastern countries, were using this sort of style of banknote at the time. And when I say Middle Eastern countries, obviously Sudan is not in the Middle East, but you've got that Arab influence because of the Muslim population there. So let's have a look at the next one, which is the last one I have, which is the highest denomination. It's the £100 note, the Sudanese pound note. Obviously I don't have the 50, unfortunately, but this one is quite a nice banknote. There's lots of detail in this which I find quite interesting. Again, you've got a completely different depiction of Sudan in the middle, and this was actually a later edition. This was introduced later than the other notes, so that's why the design elements are a little bit different. But I like how you've got the moulding of sort of like text and architecture. It's kind of interesting, the architecture moves along and then it sort of like moulds into text, which I think that's quite a cool feature. It sort of reminds me of the inside of a mosque. I don't know if that's deliberate or if that's just my mind, going off at a tangent. Probably the latter. But interesting building here as well. I won't mind knowing what this is. And again, we've got the sort of coat of arms of Sudan right here. So, and I don't know what this book is, but I would hazard a guess that it is a Quran. That would be my guess. If anybody knows, let me know. If not, I do apologise. I'm just guessing here. So, spin it around and look at the back, and you can see it's the same thing, but they've added some interesting elements. Now, this banknote does seem to be more Islamic than the other banknotes, which is interesting. And especially given that the South is predominantly Christian, this is probably why the later banknotes probably upset a lot of people there. Again, I don't want to get into the religiosity of the conflict in the Sudanese state, but maybe a lot of people in South Sudan felt that they weren't being represented in these banknotes. I don't know. Again, I'm just guessing, but yeah, interesting nonetheless. But I think this is the most beautiful banknote for me personally. I think this is the coolest one. And again, if we look at the watermark, you will actually see that it's the same thing. So there we go. So interesting, very, very interesting, and yeah, I think this would be a nice banknote to use in current Sudan, obviously because the current Republic of Sudan is an Islamic nation, and I think this banknote would fit right at home in that nation. So yeah, it's very, very nice. Okay, so that's everything that I have for you today. Let me know what you think about these interesting banknotes. I'm going to try and get hold of some of the Sudanese dinar because I think that would make for a really interesting video. And yeah, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video, and I will see you guys on the next one. It's the Money Man, signing out for now. Bye-bye.